Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, COVID-19 pretty much dominating our reports today. We'll talk about here in the United States, overseas, specifically in Europe. Also, we'll focus in on a couple states and a couple geographical areas that are really being hit hard. Also look at some of the numbers in the hospitals and how these intensive care units are being completely overwhelmed. So all that and many more. But first, we're going to talk about some of the sexual abuse cases that are now still, once again, in the news regarding the Catholic Church. Well, the pandemic has caused the average person to change their normal routines. The Pope is no exception. While traditionally he visited a large cemetery in Rome to have Mass for all the dead on November 2nd, this year he will make a private visit to the Two-Tone Cemetery in the Vatican. Now he will hold Mass there and pray briefly, then visit the caves of St. Peter's Basilica, where the tombs of former popes are located.
Then on the 5th at 11 a.m., Pope Francis will celebrate another Mass at the Basilica's main altar, this time in honor of cardinals and bishops who've died in 2020. The Vatican has announced they will not allow many pilgrims to be in attendance at the liturgy due to the coronavirus. The Church explained this will be the new norm until the pandemic slows down.
Well, focusing on some of these sexual abuse cases, there is new light being shed on a very high-profile sexual abuse case concerning the Catholic Church. Now, the Vatican Secretary of State finally released a long-awaited report within which former Archbishop Theodore McCarrick was fully investigated for accusations of sexual misconduct.
Well, at one time, McCarrick was one of America's most powerful religious leaders, appointed by Pope John Paul II as Cardinal to the Catholic Diocese in Washington, D.C. But as victims came forward accusing the powerful priest of sexual abuse, ones even higher than himself turned a blind eye. The report admits Pope John Paul II was aware of allegations of sexual misconduct by McCarrick, but chose to take his word for it that he would not do it again. Well, things seem to be going the Cardinal's way.
However, things took a turn in 2019 when Pope Francis defrocked McCarrick for sexually abusing minors and young men studying in the priesthood and ordered the church to do a thorough investigation. Now, at age 90, it made Theodore McCarrick the highest ranking official ever forced out of the Catholic Church priesthood in modern times. Now, what makes the situation so despicable is that there is much evidence proving church officials knew for many years about McCarrick's evil like the gods deeds.
Well, Francis made a promise to victims to, quote, follow the path of truth wherever it may lead. As the 400-page report is released into the public, there are many revelations to be made and many lives to be pieced back together. Well, there is also hope that through McCarrick's demise, there will be consequences and, even more importantly, prevention.
Well, there was another investigative report recently released by the IICSA and the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse. Now, this time it was directed at Cardinal Vincent Nichols, head of the Roman Catholic Church in England and Wales. Now, here's a video with some of those details, courtesy of TRT World. Take a look.
The Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse just published a damning report alleging that Cardinal Vincent Nichols, who is the leader of the Catholic Church in England and Wales, repeatedly prioritized the reputation of the Church over the welfare of child sex abuse victims. The 154-page report found that between 1970 and 2015, the Church received more than 3,000 complaints of child sexual abuse from over 1,750 victims and complainants, filed against more than 900 people connected to the Church. The report also noted that sexual abuse was a continuing trend, not just a historical one. The report also noted that sexual abuse was a continuing trend, not just a historical one. The report also noted that sexual abuse was a continuing trend, not just a historical one, with more than 100 allegations of abuse being reported every year since 2016. In reference to historical accounts, the report uncovered the church's maneuvers to protect alleged perpetrators by shuffling them between different parishes while failing to support victims and survivors. It highlights the case of Father James Robinson, who was moved to another parish after complaints were made against him in the 1980s. After fleeing to the US, he was eventually extradited back to the UK and ultimately convicted in 2010 for 21 sexual offenses against 4 boys and was sentenced to 21 years in prison. One survivor reported that between the ages of 11 and 15, they'd been abused hundreds of times by a priest, and after every instance, they were required to make confession. Another case was revealed of appalling sexual abuse inflicted upon pupils at Ampleforth College and its adjoining junior school in North Yorkshire. Furthermore, one particular survivor who provided evidence to the inquiry claimed that thousands of pounds had been spent by the Diocese of Westminster to employ lawyers to keep victims at an arm's length while they built their case. Lawyers representing the victims, as well as activist groups and support groups for survivors, have called for the immediate resignation of Cardinal Nichols. As per the Vatican's Code of Canon Law, Nichols did in fact offer his resignation to the Holy See as he was almost 75 years old, but that resignation offer was due only to his age and not due to the surrounding scandals of covering up abuse. Ultimately, the resignation wasn't accepted by Pope Francis, who, in turn, instructed Nichols to continue as cardinal and as leader of the Catholic Church in England and Wales. The report documents a shocking amount of abuse, but also notes that the true scale of misconduct is likely far worse, and that many more cases may remain undocumented. The inquiry was also critical of the Vatican, stating that such transgressions were at odds with papal pronouncements from Rome in 2019, in which Pope Francis asserted there needed to be concrete and effective actions that involve everyone in the Church regarding its approach to child sexual abuse. They reached this conclusion after the Holy See eventually denied providing a witness statement following months of correspondence with the inquiry. The investigative report also coincides with one the IICSA published last month that brought forth cases accusing the Anglican Church of England of prioritizing its reputation over protecting vulnerable children from predators for decades.
Well, it's interesting how he made the quote there that this is a continuing trend, not a historical one, indicating that this is something that has been pretty much commonplace in the Catholic Church since its inception.
Right, and some of the numbers are truly staggering that they showed in those reports, very high numbers of those abused by the Catholic Church.
And it's interesting considering that most victims of sexual abuse don't actually come forward and report it, so those numbers are probably much, much higher than what's actually being shown to us. Well, the Pope and U.S. President-elect Joe Biden have wasted no time getting to know one another. In a phone call on November 12th, Pope Francis spoke with the newly elected president, according to a statement released by Biden's transition team. The statement said, "The president-elect thanked His Holiness for extending blessings and congratulations." Well, as for the Pope's, quote, leadership, he said, in promoting peace, reconciliation, and the common bonds of humanity around the world.
Well, in their conversation, Mr. Biden also expressed his desire to collaborate with the Pope on issues such as, quote, caring for the marginalized and the poor, addressing the crisis of climate change, and welcoming and integrating refugees into our communities, end quote.
Well, we're going to switch gears now. While still focused on Italy, we want to share with you how the country is getting slammed with the new surge of COVID-19 cases. So many, it has passed the 1 millionth mark.
Well, Italy topped the news at the beginning of the pandemic, and now it seems like the nightmare is being relived as the healthcare system struggles to handle a new wave of cases. ERs are facing and actually in crisis mode, facing one death after the next, as intensive care units are running out of beds. Now, one Naples doctor, Sebastiano, told CBS Evening News that he said, quote, Rome's COVID hospitals are saturated. It's exploding again, unquote.
Wow. Well, across the United States, the virus is once again exploding as well. One of the hardest hit states right now is Wisconsin, where Governor Tony Evers is strongly urging residents to stay home. Addressing the state in a primetime televised speech, the governor pleaded with people, saying, Wisconsin, this is serious. The crisis is urgent. And he continued with, we once led our region in containing this virus, but now surges in our states rival what we saw in New York City this last spring. And remember how New York City was actually kind of leading the country in cases and deaths as well.
Right, it was an epicenter, so to speak, and the rest of the world used that as a model. I mean, watching what was going on there, hoping it wouldn't come to their area. Now they're seeing the exact same thing.
That's right.
Even worse. Mm-hmm. Well, it's pretty clear Governor Evers does not feel his state has the pandemic under control. Besides asking residents to stay home, he is calling on lawmakers to start making decisions as well. Now, he knows something has to take place in order to help stop the spread. He took the first step, signing an executive order that coincided with his speech urging Wisconsinites to stay at home. Now, the governor said, we must get back to the basics of fighting this virus just like we did last spring, and it starts at home. So please cancel the happy hours, he said, the dinner parties, the sleepovers, the play dates at your home, end quote. So basically telling people don't do all that visiting, especially this time of year with the holidays that are going to be really kicking off here. He's warning everyone, if you do that, it's really going to spread. Don't do it.
And sadly, still a lot of people are making plans to have family get-togethers as the holidays approach.
Right.
Well, we're going to turn it over now to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, who has continuing information for us regarding the coronavirus emergency and, of course, the rise of COVID-19 cases. Larry?
The country's current economic model is rooted in gross materialism and uncontrolled spending. And while promoting ideas of unrestrained self-indulgence and thoughtless living might have helped to fuel such a model and produce some short-term gains for a season, the backlash for the sort of character that it produces is now becoming apparent, where citizens are unwilling to be encumbered for very long by any restrictions that interfere with or disrupt their pursuit of pleasure and self-gratification. This is the challenging environment of the present pandemic and the struggle that authorities face in motivating the masses to unify behind simple measures that they feel would be effective in slowing the rate of transmission. The United States is now declaring a state of emergency as it continues to shatter all previous records related to the virus, and state and city leaders such as the mayor of Chicago and the governor of Illinois are pushing to have residents remain at home. Illinois' governor is asking the citizens of his state just what is it going to take to make the crisis real for them. And likewise, other governors across the nation are tightening and toughening up on restrictions and confronting their citizens concerning their incompliance. Members of President-elect Joe Biden's COVID-19 task force are pitching the idea of a national lockdown, all while citizens continue to push their way back into a semblance of normalcy and ignore all warnings. As the numbers of those infected continue to skyrocket to numbers never before seen, popular voices concerning the plague, like Dr. Anthony Fauci, are reminding the public of warnings that he gave months ago that the country could be facing 100,000 infections per day if the crisis continued. The daily record for those infected is now topped 150,000 per day, with the director of the CDC, Robert Redfield, recently stating that he does not believe that it is unlikely that the U.S. won't begin seeing 1 million cases per week very soon. The director said it is very important not to underestimate the virus. The threat, he says, is really real. As evidence of that fact, overwhelmed hospitals are continuing to struggle unsuccessfully to meet the demands of the virus, and they're reported to once again be slipping into a shortage on personal protective equipment. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katanja, back to you.
Looks like the records for the new cases, the hospitalizations, just keep getting broken one right after the next, right. Everything continuing to rise. Mm-hmm. Well, since COVID-19 began, more than 10 million Americans have been infected, including the most recent number of infections topping 1 million just since the end of October. Now, the majority of new cases are popping up in the Midwest, with the state of Michigan seeing new cases soar up 300% in the last month. Now, to add to the new cases, hospitalizations are up, with experts warning that the situation is only going to get worse. Utah's governor recently enacted a statewide mask mandate. The reason being overcrowding in the hospitals.
That's right. Utah's governor said in a press briefing regarding the hospitals, they are really at the brink of not being able to take any more people and are in the overflow mode, particularly in our intensive care units. Well, in El Paso, 1 in 5 cases test positive for the virus, and ICUs are at capacity. In fact, one funeral home's storage is currently at capacity, stating that it has 220 people awaiting cremation or burial. Nina Macias, an operations supervisor at Purchase Funeral Home, said a lot of families that have had a loved one pass away from COVID, they're all worried that they may be next.
Well, the U.S. is averaging over 50 deaths every day from COVID-related illnesses. One young man, Austin Tanner, an 18-year-old from Melvin, Michigan, died on October 27th. Now, his mother spoke to CBS this morning regarding her son's passing. She expressed how lost she feels without her son, and that she doesn't know where or how her son caught the virus, saying that he only left the house to go to church and to a support group for his anxiety. Now, Mrs. Tanner said because he was overweight has nothing to do with this disease, this virus, she said, this plague that is taking over our country, the world.
Well, she continued, this horrible virus is attacking everyone. It's not prejudice. Along with that, COVID-19 is surging in every state in the country, with new cases topping 150,000 in one day. And experts are warning that the death toll could hit 440,000 by March 1st. Well, President Trump recently spoke at a Rose Garden event, breaking his 8-day streak of silence in the midst of the surges of COVID-19 cases, saying that his administration will not impose a national lockdown.
Well, in New York City, people line the streets for COVID testing, while the mayor warns that schools could go entirely remote once again. Now, many states are employing new restrictions as cases continually surge. The pandemic is not just getting worse, but ravaging all 50 states as the number of new cases in all 50 states rapidly rise uncontrollably. Now, governors are pleading with its citizens to follow safety guidelines. Kate Brown, Oregon's governor, said it's a very dangerous situation and our hospitals have been sounding the alarm.
New Mexico's governor ordered all non-essential businesses to close for the next 2 weeks, and residents ordered to shelter in place. Now, Idaho's governor, Brad Little, said we are in the middle of an unprecedented and dangerous time in our state's history. While Colorado is shattering records for cases, their governor, Jared Polis, said these are our darkest days as a nation. They are our darkest days as a state.
Well, New York's mayor is urging parents to have alternative plans in place Monday as the nation reaches the threshold for shutting schools down once again. California has now surpassed over 1 million new COVID cases, and they're the second state to do so after Texas. And in El Paso, a state with more hospitalizations per capita than any single state in the country, their healthcare system is literally overwhelmed. Now, one nurse posted a video after her shift was over expressing her frustration and sadness as not one single patient on her shift made it through their battle of the disease and how it almost destroyed her. We've mentioned that before, how hard it is on the healthcare workers, and actually where we're seeing other reports, which we'll probably report on shortly, that the doctors, the nurses, some of them are just outright quitting. They can't take the pressure, they can't take the stress, they can't take continually seeing the patients keep dying.
That's right. That's right. It's pretty sad. Well, Minnesota is urging all 18 through 35-year-olds to get tested as they're seeing the virus spread more among young people.
Well, in Europe, France recorded more than 60,000 new cases on Saturday, which is a new daily record. One private hospital is making moves to prepare for a second wave of patients to its facility by hiring more staff and ordering more equipment. Now, currently, according to the head of ICU, things are going well now, but it is nevertheless more stressful because we know that we're going to reach a level that we didn't reach during the first wave.
France is 1 week into one of Europe's tightest lockdowns as police step up roadside checks as people are only allowed to go 1 kilometer from their homes unless they have a permit to travel for work that can't be done at home, family obligations, or medical visits. Now, Greece has entered a new lockdown, and for the next 3 weeks, people can only leave home if they make a request via mobile phone to get approval, and of course, non-essential shops have been ordered to be closed.
Well, Britain has also imposed a ban on non-UK citizens coming from Denmark as a new coronavirus strain linked to Mink. Now, the mutation of the virus has been detected in 200 people in Denmark, and most cases have been linked to mink farms, leading to the order by the Danish governments of the culling of more than 17 million mink.
Wow. German citizens are frustrated over the government's response to the virus as thousands of people demonstrated in the German city of Leipzig. People there are angry about restrictions aimed at slowing COVID-19 transmission, with Germany reporting a record number of daily cases of more than 23,000. Now, all of this is a reminder of what much of Europe faces as it tries to avoid reaching the death tolls that it saw back in the spring.
Well, like several said in our broadcast, this plague has taken over the world in what by one of the governors described as like the darkest of dark days.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And you know, of course, Israel Hawkins from the House of Yahweh, and many others of the House of Yahweh have said that same thing, that the scriptures show, prophecies actually show that the time period that we're in right now is also known prophetically as the dark days, when, of course, sin is reaching its peak, and as we're seeing these plagues, this COVID-19, one of 7, is going to continue until a great nuclear burning, which is described as 1 hour burning. And of course, there's things people can do to protect themselves and their family, their loved ones, from going through this. All they need to do, though, is to look up and contact the House of Yahweh, and of course request any information that you like regarding prophecy and understanding scripture and what you can do. And when you do contact the House of Yahweh, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. If you would like to email the House of Yahweh, you can do so by emailing info@Yahweh.com. For any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen now. And please go ahead and check out the Yisrael Says program by going to YisraelSays.com, or the Ask Yisrael program by going to AskYisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere, because up next is a light in these dark days. Yisrael Hawkins. For all of us here at YPN News, I'm Cardinal Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And thank you for watching.